great.
Yeah.
So yeah, keep going. You're doing a
Okay.
great job.
So I guess that maybe most tunes into, or that has the most to do with the trust, collaboration, and guidance part,
Mhm.
and safety, I guess, because I want to make sure, I think, I want students to feel comfortable and safe coming to me with questions. And sometimes in the library setting, those questions can be things that can be not so much at really young ages, but it's easy when you ask a question to feel vulnerable. And so I try to encourage that. And sometimes, especially as they get older, some of those questions can be ones that are embarrassing. There are books that you might check out or be asking for that you don't want other people to necessarily know that you're checking out. So like if a boy is checking out a book about ballet, that might be for some reason something that is not, that a peer could use against him if he felt sensitive about that for whatever reason. And so those sorts of things, I try to protect students' privacy in that way, and so that's an important piece of the trust thing. Also along with that, when a student is asking for a book that is checked out, like if they are asking for a book and they say, well, who has it? And it's my policy to say, sorry, I'll protect your privacy and I'll protect their privacy. So it's, but I can put it on hold for you and you'll get it next, but you don't need to worry about who has it now. And obviously that's not only for the reason I just mentioned, but so that they don't go and harass that student and say, bring this book back, I really want to read it. And so that person can take their turn. And as they get older, like I said, there are other, like a student carrying around a book about teen pregnancy or an STD, like anything like that, it can be really sensitive to ask some of those questions that are perfectly natural, normal questions for a person to want to ask. So I want to make sure that they feel safe looking for the information they want in this setting as much as possible. We're still a really small little school, so it's hard to protect that confidentiality, but so that's one really important piece of it. What was I saying before about, can you say, let's see, before I was talking about confidentiality, I was talking about, so trying to tune into the students as individuals. I wish I'd planned a little better what I wanted to say, but
what about guidance, especially with the older students, because I know you help them with research, and I'm sure there's a lot of guidance involved. How do you do that?
So I try to first get, and this is a challenge, but since I don't have a set time with students, I try to get times where I can come into their classes when they're working on a particular project. So I try to collaborate with the teachers in an effort to be able to work with the students. So I have those opportunities that don't add on more, but that work along with what they're already doing in their classes. And that gives me, if they don't know me as well, if they haven't had as many interactions with me, then that gives me an opportunity to interact with them in a setting they're already comfortable with in their classroom. And hopefully there are very real things that, very real phenomena that are studied in library science that are about library anxiety, and people walking into libraries and just feeling like, okay, I'm supposed to know how to do this, but I don't. Like I feel confused and anxious, and I'm not sure where to start. And so that, I guess I really see my role as sort of information counselor in that sense. And so being able to go in and give them a little bit of information about here's how you start looking when it's in their classroom, it gives them an opportunity to feel a little more confident about coming into the library and doing that. It really helps when they have a project that they're already working on, rather than trying to do it in the abstract and just teach them the skills without them having a specific concrete thing that they're doing. So collaborating with teachers in order to be able to work with the students is super helpful for me. It's really important. That helps me guide the students, and then I'm kind of working with them as a class and giving them a general framework for, okay, when you start a research project, you'll start here, and you want to think about what do you know already, and what can you use from that to find out a little bit more and get some basic understanding of your topic. And then once you have that, use those terms that you already know to keep searching for more information. And as you search for more information, make sure you keep track of what you found and make sure that you document along the way and that you collect it real carefully so that you can find it again and you can cite your sources and those things. So I try to give them a useful framework. And then it's a lot of giving them that information as a class and then letting them do it and ask questions as they come along. So, and those questions will usually be like individual one-on-one kinds of things. So when I do a lesson with students, I try to make it very active so that I start out by a short lecture-ish thing, you know, where I have a little presentation and give them the basics, and then they do something. And then as they're doing that, then they can ask questions, and if one of the questions seems like it would be relevant to everybody, then I'll stop and say, okay, here's something that's important that came up. And that way it's really relevant to what they're doing, what they need.
That seems to fit in with opportunity too.
Yeah.
Opportunity pops up, you deal with
So,
it.
okay, so can you tell me how does the opportunity fit into this gear? Tell me a little more about that word.
So the opportunity, and when opportunities show up during the day, in a classroom, if a student asks a question or wants to do something, that's what I think is opportunity.
Okay,
but you might have a different definition of opportunity for you.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Having opportunities to, just having the opportunity for the students feeling safe and like they have the chance to ask those questions. Like space has been made for that, like they're encouraged to. In addition to the teacher being able to seize those opportunities and change tactics if necessary and that sort of thing. And that's required a lot. Especially like the search process is very much about that, because I'll have a student, I'm thinking about lower school because we're sitting in the lower school library, but I might have a student who says, well, I'm looking for books about the Army. And I have to ask more questions about that. Like, we have books that are like, here's the Army, but maybe they're looking for things from modern day, maybe they're looking for things from history, maybe they're looking for a storybook, maybe they're looking for information. So, and with young kids especially, they don't always know what they're asking for, so they'll come to me with a title, and it turns out that they've been reading the title totally wrong, so they'll say the wrong word, and I don't know what book they're talking about, and I have to do a lot of hunting to figure that out. And so working with them to get to that point where we find what they want requires them feeling safe enough to be vulnerable with me to ask those questions and to get them wrong, and to know that I'm not going to laugh at them because they were pronouncing it wrong or whatever.
What about when you're here reading with the lower school? I notice you doing a read aloud, and how do you choose those books to do the read aloud?
That's developed over time because I had to figure out what books worked and what didn't sometimes. But I do kind of have certain ones that for each grade level, there are certain books that bring about discussions. And those discussions start out sort of simply, like at the beginning of the year for most of my classes, I'll read a book about, it's a story, but it's very literally about using the library. Like it's an elf that ends up teaching you skills for like finding books and using shelf markers and basic things that they have to do to help keep the library from being in chaos. And then as we go along, it starts to get a little more complex. Like there's for kindergarten, for example, there's a book that I read called The Sign Maker's Assistant that talks about a little boy who is like an apprentice to a sign maker, and he realizes that he can play tricks on people by making all the wrong signs, and we talk about how important it is to read signs and to pay attention to them, and sometimes they mean danger, and sometimes they tell you where you're going, and different, using your awareness of your environment to read and to tune into these different cues is important for navigating through the world. But you also have to think critically, because when the boy is playing tricks on people, he puts signs up that say no school today, and the principal gets there and says, oh, I didn't know we didn't have school today, and just walks away, and you know, and they're like, wait, you know, shouldn't they check into that and think a little bit more? So thinking critically, I mean, that's a really young example, but introducing the idea of putting a little more thought into it rather than just being like taking it at face value and believing it which is important in a library.